I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, December 14th. A chilly morning here in the Mid-Atlantic region. Still looks like a relatively mild and quiet week in much of the eastern part of the nation. Meanwhile, out in the west, California continues to get pounded by a big storm, producing some significant rainfall along the coastline and significant snows in the higher elevations inland. Places like the Sierra Nevada mountains receiving 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 or 5 feet of snow in this particular storm system over the next couple of days. Meanwhile, we talked yesterday about definitely a different look to the overall pattern come next week, to a colder pattern. Again, generally mild, quiet weather this week for much of the eastern two-thirds of the nation, but things are going to start to change over the upcoming weekend, and we have to watch for a system early next week for the possibility of some snow in the northeastern part of the nation. Yesterday we talked about the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is a teleconnection index that monitors the tropics, and specifically a wave and an area of enhanced thunderstorm activity that generally propagates kind of on a regular basis across the tropics, and where that wave or pulse ends up, or what is known as a particular phase, can dictate certain overall temperature and precipitation patterns. And we talked yesterday about the MJO going through a warm phase right now, phase 6, but by the time we get to next week and beyond, it looks like it gets into colder phases for the central and eastern U.S., phases 7 and 8, hence supporting evidence for a pattern change from this mild weather this week to colder pattern next week, and perhaps beyond that as well. Let's look at a couple other teleconnection indices right now we've talked about frequently. These are related to the Arctic region. The first one here is the North Atlantic oscillation. The second one is kind of a closely related cousin known as the Arctic oscillation. When both of these indices are in negative territory, especially for a sustained period of time, that tends to correlate well with blocking pattern over the high latitudes, places like Greenland or Iceland or northeastern Canada, higher heights than normal, higher pressure than normal up in that part of North America. And when that happens, that generally leads to a better chance, a more favorable chance for cold air outbreaks to push from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. And indeed, the NAO is forecast here to shift into negative territory over the next couple of days. You can see it right here. The black represents the observations from the current time to the preceding several weeks, and the red, the forecast, and it goes from positive into negative over the next week to 10 days or so. Right in here, it looks like a pretty sustained period of a negative NAO. So that is kind of going along with what we're seeing with the Madden-Julian oscillation. Again, that's a tropical indicator. This is a North Atlantic indicator, and it does shift into negative territory over the next few days. Well, how about the Arctic oscillation? That too tends to have a downtrend over the next few days, perhaps not quite as dramatic as the NAO, but it too is in slightly positive territory. Anything above this line right here is positive and below is negative. The general trend over the next several days is downward. So these two teleconnection indices are showing some changes now that correlate better with the MJO, which showed us a signal really before these two have changed to a colder pattern coming to the central and eastern states. Well, let's take a look at how these changes may take place in the upper part of the atmosphere. We're looking at 500 millibar height anomaly forecast from the ensemble run of the GFS from last night at 0Z. This one is for this morning, Tuesday morning, December 14th. A few areas that jump out at you. First of all, deep trough right here out along the west, or just off the west coast of the U.S., and that is contributing to that big-time storm that's pounding California with significant rain in the lower elevations and significant snow in the higher elevations, and some of that significant precipitation is spreading eastward into the other parts of the western U.S. Meanwhile, right here, centered over the upper Midwest, a very strong ridge, and that's controlling the weather pattern over the next, excuse me, over the next few days, with generally quiet, warmer than normal conditions in much of the eastern half of the nation. That is the big player. No blocking right now over Greenland. If there were, we would see orange sitting on top of Greenland, higher heights to normal, but that is not the case right now. There is a strong ridge kind of closing in slowly towards Alaska. It's right now centered out over the Aleutian Islands. Well, let's now take a look at how this will change 1 week from now, next Tuesday, according to the ensemble run of the GFS. Again, this is this morning, and here we go by next Tuesday, a week from now. Notice the big change, first of all, over Greenland. The NAO shifting into negative territory, the AO trending downward, both kind of indicate blocking may form over Greenland, and indeed that is tied up here in the forecast from the ensemble run of the GFS. Again, we have nothing like that right now, but a week from now, some blocking here, and that always raises the possibility of more colder air outbreaks making it into the central and eastern U.S. So that is one of the things to look for if you're a meteorologist in the northeastern part of the country, for a change to more winter-like weather. Notice also that big trough now over the west coast kind of retrogrades a little bit. It actually moves a little bit south and west, and that changes the overall flow up across the northwestern part of Canada. A week from now, according to this forecast, the flow will allow for cold air masses to drop in this fashion right into the northern part of the U.S. from the upper part of Canada. This kind of a flow does allow for the possibility of those cold air outbreaks, whereas what we have right now does not. We'll take a look at that right here again. This kind of a flow is certainly blocking any Arctic air from making its way into the U.S., and certainly the eastern two-thirds of the nation. This is what we have now, and then when we go out a week from now, that all changes. The flow is definitely more conducive to cold air outbreaks, at least making it into the north central states and the northeastern part of the nation. There'll be kind of a battle zone probably setting up across maybe the mid-Atlantic region for considerably colder than normal, perhaps north of there, and closer to normal or even above normal to the south of there across the southern part of the mid-Atlantic region. We'll see how that plays out. Well, let's now take a look at the operational run of the GFS 0Z run last night. I want to really emphasize the wave of interest out of the southern stream that could play a role, let's say next Monday or Tuesday, in the northeastern part of the nation. Not much going on right now. Again, a quiet, relatively mild week here in the eastern two-thirds of the nation. Then we have a frontal system that will pass through on Thursday evening, right in this kind of an upper air pattern right here. We do have a weak front. It'll drop temperatures probably from 60 degrees on Thursday afternoon back into the 50s on Friday. Not a major change by any means, but then a little bit more significant front comes through over the upcoming weekend. And it looks like that will be associated with some shower activity Saturday night time frame. That front comes on through, and then high pressure tries to build. This is the Sunday morning forecast map. Again, we have a cooler air mass moving in at this time, and high pressure starting to build across southeastern Canada. Always something I look for, and we'll take a look at that in the surface maps in a moment. This then is the wave of interest way down in the southern stream that could play a role in the mid-Atlantic region in the northeast U.S., let's say next Monday, Tuesday time frame. It does scoot on out to the north and east. Here we are by Monday, and it kind of joins up with another incoming wave in the upper part of the atmosphere by Tuesday morning, and by this time there could be a pretty healthy looking storm along the New England coastline. Let's now take a look at the surface map. And here are the surface forecast maps from the 0Z run of the GFS. And remember yesterday's video, the GFS showed that early week storm next week going to the north and west, kind of an inland cutter towards the Great Lakes. And I suggested that it's quite likely that the GFS will shift that to the south and east, allowing for a colder solution for the northeastern part of the nation. Just the way the overall pattern looks like it's evolving, and indeed that has happened in the overnight run. A big shift. We'll see that in a moment here to the south and east, allowing for a much more interesting possibility next Monday or so. Of course, we're still several days away, but for now, high pressure over southeastern Canada this morning. That is putting in a little bit cooler air down the coastline, affecting the northeastern part of the nation, the mid-Atlantic region. We are still a little bit above normal, but without that high, it could be well above normal. But moderately chilly conditions today. Now let's just move forward here. Again, relatively quiet over the next few days. And this high does shift off the eastern seaboard. Notice here by Wednesday evening, it's off the eastern seaboard. By the time we get into Thursday morning, southwest flow will develop on its backside, pushing milder air into the Ohio Valley, into the Mid-Atlantic region, and ultimately into the northeastern part of the nation. In other words, Thursday looks like it'll be the peak of this warm stretch here, probably highs of 60 degrees or higher in D.C., Philadelphia, maybe 55 to 60 in New York City, again on the backside of that high pressure system. Then a weak front comes through. It turns a little bit cooler. Right in here there's a weak frontal system by the time we get to Friday, so there certainly will be maybe a 5 to 10 degree drop with this little bit of a weak cool frontal system right in that region by Friday morning, and it's pushing to the south and east. Now let's move farther down the line here. Now we go into the weekend. Looks like we may have to deal with a warm front, some showers on Saturday, and then the cold front associated with this low pressure area looks like it'll start to drop south and east. And here's the cold frontal position right here. Comes Saturday evening and pushing in this direction. This is definitely a little bit of a stronger front than what we'll deal with on Thursday night. It does come on through here by the time we get to the Sunday morning, and a couple of big players here I want to point out. First of all, strong high pressure, Canadian high pressure, starting to build in. It's moving in this direction, and I often highlight the significance of a high across southeastern Canada for any potential snow in the mid-Atlantic region, in the northeastern U.S. You almost always need that high up there to lock in a cold air mass, especially along the I-95 corridor region. It's quite difficult to get accumulating snow this time of the year in this part of the country, any time of the year really, in the I-95 corridor region. And one of the usual requirements is high pressure up in this region. So we have that high moving in. This is a Sunday morning forecast map, and then here's that moisture associated with that southern stream system by the early part of Sunday. Now let's move forward here. Watch what happens. The GFS, by the time we get to Monday morning, has quite a winter-like look to it. First of all, nice to see this strong high if you are a fan of snow in the Mid-Atlantic region, the northeast U.S. It's still fighting climatology this time of the year. There's a reason why it's difficult to get accumulating snow in December, and that's because the ocean's just off the Jersey coastline still relatively warm this time of the year. The ocean doesn't really bottom out in temperatures until, let's say, March. So that's the main reason why it's difficult to get accumulating snow in the month of December. And one thing you almost always need is that high to the north. And it even shows signs of a nice cold air damming setup. That typically happens when you have high pressure to the north and it kind of funnels cold air down along the east side of the Appalachians, what we call cold air damming. And that is more favorable for the possibility of some frozen precipitation, especially in the I-95 corridor region. Let's move forward here, and here we go. By the time we get to Monday evening, notice the position of the low way south and east. Yesterday's 0Z run had it going up in this fashion, and we kind of mentioned that it's very likely to drop south and east. Indeed, now off the Carolina coastline by Monday evening. 6 days away now, but snow breaking out in the Mid-Atlantic region, and it intensifies at that, becomes quite a strong storm here now. This is one run of the GFS from 0Z last night. I will say the Canadian model is somewhat similar in a winter storm type of threat for next Monday, Tuesday. The Euro is not quite there yet. It has some kind of a system by later, a little bit later, maybe Monday night, Tuesday time frame, but nothing like this. So this is certainly something we'll monitor over the next few days. In general, quiet, mild weather pattern this week, a colder look to the overall pattern next week and beyond, all supported by what's going on with some of these teleconnection indices, the MJO, a tropical teleconnection index, and an Arctic region index known as the NAO, and its closely related cousin, the AO, also kind of supporting the idea of a change to a colder pattern next week. So we'll focus in on this, of course, over the next several days. That's it for now. I'm meteorologist Paul